Hi there, everyone. I'm sure you've all probably had a situation like this where you're taking care of a patient and you check their sodium levels and you see that it's 120, and now you got to figure out what's going on. By the end of the presentation today, you'll be able to address hyponatremia with absolutely no issues, and I will do that because I'm a hospitalist. My name is Prerak, and I love talking about all things medicine. And to prove that you will understand everything, ideally, by the end of this video, you should understand all of the nuances of this chart, and I will also be including different Anki notes that I have taken to show you the way I work up hyponatremia. Before you even begin, when you have that patient who comes in with a sodium of 120, the first thing you need to do before doing any intervention at all is to get labs. The reason why labs are important is because they provide us with an objective measure of what's going on with that patient in their bloodstream, in their urine, and specifically with their endocrine systems, with the ROS system and with the ADH system. When you get these labs, it is, again, important to do it before you do any intervention, such as giving fluids or even diuresing the patient, because those things will confound the values of these labs. After you get these labs, we are going to break down each of these labs, and the questions that we will be asking are very, very nuanced. I'll start with the serum osmolality, or some places it's the osmolarity. Whatever it is, you're going to have a value that can either be below normal, normal, or above normal. If you have a value of serum osmolality that's below normal, then you have true hypoosmolar hyponatremia. This means that the osmoles in your blood are low and your sodium is also low. And that lines up, that checks out. That is known as true hyponatremia, and there can be a lot of reasons this can be the case, and we'll go over them. Let's say you have a normal osmolality in the serum. Well, that's interesting, right? Because your sodium is low, but the amount of osmoles in your blood is normal. The reason why that can usually be the case is because you have something in your bloodstream that's not being measured when we measure the serum osmolality, or it is something that is causing the amount of water in the bloodstream to get higher, and that leads to lower sodium levels. That can often be because of proteins in your blood. It can also be because of lipids in your blood, and both of those things can lead to low sodium levels. And the last thing you can have is high osmolality. And the high osmoles can be due to other things that are actually measured in your serum osmolality, such as glucose. And if you have high glucose levels, that can also cause hyponatremia, because the glucose in your bloodstream draws in water, and that then leads to the low sodium levels. The first one is the only one you really have to worry about because that's true hyponatremia. In the second and third cases, your sodium is only low because it's being confounded by other things in your bloodstream. And so that's usually not too big of a deal, and you can often correct for those things. Like, for example, when you're hyperglycemic, you can correct for hyperglycemia to see what your true sodium level is. And that's not as worrisome. So assuming you have true hypoosmolar hyponatremia, the next lab that we want to look at is your urine osmolality. The reason why urine osmolality is important is because it is an indirect representation of what's going on with ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormones inserts aquaporins into the nephrons of collecting ducts, into the collecting duct of nephrons, and that leads to reabsorption of water. The water is reabsorbed from your urine into your bloodstream. So if ADH is working and those aquaporins are inserted into the collecting duct, you're going to get water leave the urine and enter your bloodstream. And therefore, your urine should be concentrated. So your urine osmolality should be high. So if ADH is working, your urine osmolality should be above 100. If ADH is not working, that means water is not being reabsorbed, and that means water stays in your urine, and that leads to more dilute urine. And so, with that being said, use the urine osmolality as an indication of whether or not ADH is working. So serum osmolality is here to tell you if you have true hyponatremia. Urine osmolality is here to tell you if ADH is working or if it's not working. And then the last thing I told you to get is a urine sodium. Urine sodium is used as a proxy to see if the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system is working. If your urine sodium is less than 20 or 30, that means your renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system is working because it is noticing that your blood volume is low and causing your body to reabsorb sodium. The sodium is reabsorbed and ultimately then leads to reabsorption of water because water follows sodium. So if your urine sodium is low, that is an indication that ROS is on. And if your urine sodium is high, that is an indication that ROS is off. There can be a lot of reasons why this will be the case. So, with that being said, here is a brief summary of everything we talked about. Serum osmolality will tell you if it's true hyponatremia. If you do not have true hyponatremia and your urine and your serum osmolality is not low, then you should think about hyperproteinemia, hyperlipidemia, or even glucose, which can then lead to fat water coming into the bloodstream and diluting that sodium. Urine osmolality is being used as an ADH proxy, and urine sodium is being used as a ROS proxy. So here's the final algorithm recap, and hopefully you understand every component of this now. When you have hyponatremia, get the osmolality first. You want to make sure you have true hyponatremia, which is this first box, which means you should have low serum osms. If you have low serum osms, I then look at the urine sodium, I look at the urine osms, and I also compare it to what I think the patient looks like. If the patient is very puffy, they have a ton of lower extremity edema, they have a ton of pulmonary edema, that's what you call a hypervolemic patient. Their volume status is high, and that means that they might have cirrhosis, CHF, or nephrotic syndrome leading to their hyponatremia. If the patient is, let's say, super frail, you can see that they're very dehydrated, they have very, very low cap refill. They also have, when you have skin turgor, their skin turgor is not very great, that's hypovolemic. And this is a patient that you might actually consider giving fluid to. And let's say the patient looks about normal, then they're euvolemic, and they might actually have something called SIADH. The important part is that sometimes you may not know if a patient looks hypervolemic, euvolemic, or hypovolemic. It's very tough to know. And that's why it's important to get those urine sodium and the urine osms, because then you can actually say, hey, if the urine sodium looks below 20 and the urine osms also seem to be below 100, then you might say, oh, they actually look a little dry. Maybe let's give them fluid and see if they get better. On the other hand, let's say their urine osm is super high, maybe it's like 600, and they're hyponatremic. That is a sign that maybe they have something called SIADH, which is their ADH is wrong, but maybe their ADH is on, but it's not working appropriately. It's inappropriately on. And so that's what's known as SIADH. When you have any form of true hyponatremia, a few other things I get are a TSH, and I also get an AM cortisol because you want to rule out adrenal insufficiency as well as hypothyroidism, which can also be a mimicker of hyponatremia. The other interesting part is that if you actually truly think a patient has SIADH, the way you treat it is very different than if you think the patient is hypovolemic. If the patient is hypovolemic, you might actually consider giving them fluid because you think that their volume down, and that's leading to their hyponatremia. And if they're hypervolemic, you actually might consider giving them diuretics, right? Because diuretics will help get them some of this fluid off, which might actually help their sodium paradoxically. So let's say you're in this middle category and you have SIADH. What should you do? Well, SIADH is known as inappropriate ADH release. Your ADH is on, but it's inappropriately on. And because of that, you're unable to get rid of free water, and that leads to free water building up in your body, which then dilutes the sodium in your bloodstream, which then leads to low sodium. You will usually have urine osms that are above 100, and your urine sodium will also be above 30, as opposed to below 20, which is more consistent with the hypovolemic state and activation of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. However, if you truly want to diagnose someone with SIADH, you need to rule out adrenal insufficiency and hypothyroidism, which is why I often get an AM cortisol and a TSH. And the common causes of SIADH include malignancy, medications such as antidepressants and antiepileptics. And the way to treat SIADH is actually with fluid restriction, which is paradoxical, right? Because if someone is hypovolemic, what would you do? You would give them fluids. But if someone has SIADH, what would you do? You would fluid restrict them. So that's very impressive. It's important to know these things. You can consider giving these patients who have SIADH salt tabs and urea tabs as well. Now, let's say someone has horrible hyponatremia, and even though you've kind of figured out what's going on, it's just so low that you're worried that they might actually seize, and especially with very low sodium levels, you worry about how do we treat it. Well, the most important thing is once you figure out what's going on, you want to try to correct the sodium slowly. And ideally, you want to correct the sodium 4 to 8 milliequivalents over 24 hours. So that means if a patient is at 120 at 7 a.m. today, by 7 a.m. tomorrow, they should be at most 128. And the reason for this is there is this hypothetical risk of osmotic demyelination syndrome, which happens when you overcorrect sodium too quickly. This is something that we have been taught, but one thing I want to show you is that traditional teaching has stated that this can happen, but there have been several studies that have shown that even if you correct a little quickly, you actually don't see ODS happen all that much. However, it is a life-threatening condition, and that's why we actually I haven't changed my practice all that much, and I still aim to correct by 6 to 8, only because I would hate to see it happen, even if I know it's not necessarily linked with how fast you correct. Again, there was a lot of research going on about this, so the goal is just I go slow and steady, make sure the patient's understanding what's going on, and then try my best to kind of address what the trigger is, if it's SIADH or hypovolemia. When do you use hypertonic saline? Well, you use hypertonic saline when you have severe and symptomatic hyponatremia. So this is a patient who came in with a sodium of like 110, they had a seizure, they're totally obtunded, or maybe they're having horrible neuro symptoms. Someone who has symptomatic and severe hyponatremia are patients who deserve hypertonic saline, and you often need to get them in an ICU. And the reason why you need to do it is because in an ICU, when you give the hypertonic saline, you can measure the sodium much more appropriately. You also need to make sure that as you give the hypertonic, you also avoid overcorrection. Again, this is hypothetical, but it's still important. So all that to say, obviously, these are some of the components of overcorrection, which I'm not going to stress on too much. But the one thing I do want you all to know is all the stuff we just went over, which is as you take care of a patient with hyponatremia, if it is truly severe hyponatremia, you want to make sure you're checking the sodium regularly. You want to figure out what's going on, because if it's SIADH, you're going to want to fluid restrict the patient. If you think the patient is volume down, you might want to give the patient fluid back. And if you think the patient's volume up, they may actually paradoxically improve with diuretic. And again, you don't always have to be right. Let's say you give the patient fluid and their sodium gets worse. Well, that's fine. Guess what? Maybe we fluid restrict them. Maybe we give them some salt tabs. Let's say you fluid restrict the patient and their sodium gets worse. We can give them a little bit of fluid and go from there. It's never a clear answer in a lot of these patients, and you have to go slow and steady. So final algorithmic recap: serum osmolality, urine osmolality, urine sodium should guide you in terms of what direction you are. You'll fall into one of these buckets. Hypothesize what's going on. If you think it's SIADH, make sure you rule out hypothyroidism and adrenal insufficiency. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully you understand this diagram now, and I'll see you all in the next video.